The world is on a knife edge. There's over 100 armed conflicts currently taking place right across the globe. Some of these are new, others have been going on for decades, but each episode will break down everything you need to know to understand the battles shaping the world today. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Maddie Hale. This week, we are looking at whether there are cracks forming in China's military. In the last year, about a dozen high-ranking senior generals and executives have been expelled from the ministry over corruption. In the last week, two former defence ministers, who hadn't been seen since last year, were also stood down and now under investigation. Since Xi Jinping came into power in 2012, it's reported he's expelled around 1 million government officials. This latest sweeping purge of generals begs the question: how strong is Xi Jinping's military and how loyal are those controlling it? Are these weaknesses slowing down the communist country's plans to modernise and create the best military in the world to outrank the United States? Joining me now to discuss this is Dmitri Alperovitch, national security expert and author of World on the Brink: How America Can Beat China in the Race for the 21st Century. Dmitri, thanks so much for joining me today. Now, last week it was revealed that China had expelled its former defence minister Li Shangfu and his predecessor Wei Feng from the CCP's military over alleged corruption. What kind of corruption would lead to this expulsion within the military, do you think?
Well, all of this seems to be tied to much broader corruption investigation into China's rocket forces that are responsible for their missiles and rockets, as well as their nuclear arsenal. And the reality is that both the defense ministers have been tied to the rocket forces, have previously commanded them, and there have been other officers, as many as 9, that have been dismissed and purged over the last year or so for corruption in those rocket forces. And it's clear that Xi Jinping has concerns about the readiness of that force. There have been allegations that the missiles have been fueled with water instead of liquid fuel, that the lids in the silos aren't working properly. So he's trying to get to the bottom of that.
Does that mean that this is, actual tampering that's going on within Xi Jinping's rocket area of his government military?
Well, I think what's clear is that there is a lot of corruption in the PLA, as there is in many authoritarian systems. We witnessed in the conflict with Ukraine the degradation of the Russian armed forces due to corruption there. And it's also clear that Xi Jinping is trying rapidly to modernize the force, to build it up, and he's questioning its readiness. We know that he's given the target to the PLA to be ready for invasion of Taiwan by 2027. So he's digging in and making sure that they're actually following through on that order.
Dmitri, various banished officials, including Li Shangfu, who was removed from his job in October last year, he was removed and with no explanation and then vanished from public. Is there any indication on your end what happened to him?
No, we don't know. The system is very not transparent. There are rumors, of course, not just about corruption, but potentially some espionage activity on behalf of the United States in the rocket forces. But we don't know for sure. And there could be politics in play as well. There have been many people that Xi Jinping has purged over the years since coming into power, that he's done so purely to eliminate potential rivals.
There is this wider purge going on under Xi's regime in the last year, these high-ranking officials in his military, but also those 9 generals that were expelled within just one day in December. And there's reportedly, as I said in the introduction, been around 1 million since 2012, since he was brought in. Is there a coercion of corruption happening within his military? Is it almost seen as an act of rebellion against his communist regime?
I don't think it's an act of rebellion. There's always been corruption in the Chinese military. People want to line up their pockets, particularly when the spending is increasing so massively as it has under his regime. And we also have to put it into context, right? The biggest purge of military personnel, perhaps in history, happened in the 1930s in the Soviet Union under Stalin during the Great Terror. And just a few years later, after purging almost 40,000 officers in the Red Army, he launched the Winter War against Finland. And then in 1945, of course, Soviet troops were marching through Berlin. So we have to be cognizant that those types of purges and investigations may not alter the long-term trajectory of the Chinese military.
He has been compared to Stalin as of late with this purge, Dmitri, but could you look at this latest purge with these 2 high-ranking generals and think that Xi's military could be crumbling or needed to be completely overturned?
I think that's a mistake. I think it's tied to the issues that he's identifying in the rocket forces. There's no indication that the other parts of the armed forces, the ground forces, the Navy, the Air Force, are having any of the same issues.
How high are the stakes when you're a military official working for a communist government?
Well, there's no question that an authoritarian regime like China's, or North Korea's for that matter, that when you fail, the stakes are not just your job, but potentially your freedom and maybe even your life. So a lot of these officials know that when they're engaging in corruption or potentially espionage activity, that they're risking death.
Dmitri, how do you think this reshuffle and this purge will weaken Xi's desire to modernise his military and compete against the United States?
I don't think it will. I think this is actually an indication that he's very much focused on that modernization, that he's focused on that 2027 goals. He's trying to eliminate any obstacles that stand in the way, including corruption, including challenges in his rocket forces, which, by the way, are the largest land-based missile and rocket forces in the world. And they're going to be absolutely essential to attempting to deter U.S. intervention in the conflict over Taiwan and ultimately trying to assure that he can conquer that island.
The people that he has dismissed from the army, are they working for other unallied countries? Have they been found to be doing anything criminally, and up for criminal conviction against the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, no official information has come on that, but there have been rumors that certain members or perhaps potentially their families have been accused of conducting espionage on behalf of the United States. But those could be slander allegations by political rivals as well.
Dmitri, some of the generals purged were from the PLA rocket force, as you mentioned, that are responsible for China's nuclear and ballistic missiles. I'm going to read out what a source told Bloomberg. They said that the corruption inside China's rocket force and throughout the nation's defence industrial base is so extensive that US officials now believe that Xi is less likely to contemplate major military action in the coming years than he would otherwise. It would have been the case. What are your thoughts on that statement from a source that told Bloomberg?
Well, I don't disagree that I think an invasion over Taiwan is not likely to happen for at least the next 4 years. But 4 years is a very long time to fix those issues, to put new leadership in place, to address corruption. So I think we should not be complacent. I think we're on a path to very dangerous conflict, as I write in my book, and it could happen as soon as 2028.
So you don't think this will push back Xi's plans to invade Taiwan by the 2027 target?
Well, I don't think 27 was at all realistic, in part because that is very much a political goal. What is happening in 2027? He is up for re-election in the Chinese Communist Party Congress. It is also the 100th year anniversary of the PLA. So no doubt he wants to be able to address that Congress as part of his re-election campaign and basically say that we are now ready at a moment's notice to launch this invasion of Taiwan. It does not mean that he actually plans to do it that year. In fact, that year would be a terrible time to do so because it would be like the United States launching a war in the midst of its own election campaign. But I think in 2028, once he's reelected, which is very likely to happen, once he's brought in new officials, new ideology into the party, he's passed all of that bureaucratic work and his hands are essentially free to look at his legacy, potentially his last term in power, because in 2032, when that term ends, he'll be 79. Unlike perhaps the American system, they may not elect leaders into their 80s. So he'll be looking at cementing that legacy and going down into the pantheon of Chinese history as someone who's achieved what Mao couldn't do, which is take Taiwan.
So do you think that he knows that this could be his last term in office and he's building this, loyal followers and a great establishment in his military personnel, his high-ranking officials, so that when he does pass over the reins to whoever is his next successor, they will inherit, one of the greatest group of loyalists to the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't think it's necessarily about that. I think he wants to be the one to have accomplished this great mission that the Chinese Communist Party, of course, has focused on since 1949, which is unification with Taiwan. Mao couldn't do that. If Xi Jinping can accomplish that, he will be a great leader in the view of Chinese historians. So he wants to do it on his own watch. He wants to make sure the military is ready to do so in that 2028, 2032 time period.
So do you see this 2028, 2032 period actually playing out where China will 100% invade Taiwan?
No, there's no certainty like that. I think he would like to, but it's going to be based on conditions that he sees on the ground, both the readiness of his own military, but also what's happening in the Taiwan Strait, what the Taiwanese military has done, and it's increasing its defense spending, it's reforming its reserve forces and training, it's increasing its procurement of key weapon systems, what the Japanese are doing, what the Americans, of course, are doing as well, and how much leverage he has, particularly over the United States, to deter it from coming to Taiwan's aid. Because the reality is, Taiwan will not be able to defend itself alone against a PLA invasion. It will need the United States on its side. If Xi Jinping, through the combination of military power as well as economic power, can deter that intervention, that will spell really doomed results for Taiwan.
Well, I'll ask you this, Dmitri. If Xi Jinping hypothetically decided to invade Taiwan tomorrow, is his military ready for that?
Not tomorrow, no. I think they're years away from that. But by 2028, they possibly could be.
Okay. Well, Li Guangchang, a former nuclear fuel director at China's National Nuclear Corporation, is also under investigation for serious violations of law and discipline. So this corruption is seeping into China's nuclear program as well, an area that they're obviously desperate to dominate in. How bad would it be if China's nuclear progress also saw delays?
Well, I think, again, we have to be cognizant of the reality that they are one of the largest nuclear powers, the third largest nuclear power in the world. They had about 300 nuclear warheads at the beginning of this decade. The U.S. intelligence community estimates are that they want to get to as many as 1,000 by the end of 2030 and potentially match the U.S. arsenal by the mid-2030s. This is a game of power projection and wanting to be on the same footing as the United States in every area. But 300 warheads is an incredible amount and is plenty to deter any type of nuclear attack on China and cause pause for anyone that would think about launching a war with China.
So is it safe to say that Xi Jinping, despite all the reshuffling and the standing down of so many of his high-ranking officials, has been quite successful in modernising his military since 2012?
There are challenges, no doubt, and I'm sure that things are not going as fast as he wants to, but the progress has been remarkable. The shipbuilding capacity is now 200 times what it is in the United States. The munitions arsenals is absolutely enormous. The training that they're conducting virtually every single week around Taiwan is getting more and more menacing. So he's getting ready for this.
Just finally, Dmitri, Joe Biden's performance at the presidential debate on Thursday sparked a lot of concerns about how he would go with another 4 years in office if he were to win, especially when it comes to national security and this growing threat of China. How important do you think Joe Biden's cognitive abilities, but it also just in a general sense, how important is it to have such a firm, strong leader elected when it comes to the US is standing with China currently?
Well, you never want a president that is whose cognitive abilities are being questioned either by your allies or by your enemies, for that matter. And I'm sure that the Chinese and, frankly, the Russians that were watching this debate last week were quite pleased with themselves about the state of American democracy.
Dmitri Alperovitch, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.